Case number 1 is that of Charles Ng, a man whose crimes remain among the darkest and most methodical in American criminal history. This story begins in the remote woods of Calaveras County, California, a place that should have offered quiet, isolation, and the kind of stillness people seek to escape the world. But for those who crossed paths with Ng and his partner Leonard Lake, that isolation became a trap. Behind the trees and beneath the soil sat a cabin that would eventually reveal a nightmare. A bunker designed not for survival, but for the captivity, torture, and murder of unsuspecting victims. Ng's partnership with Leonard Lake was the foundation of the violence that followed. Lake, already immersed in a twisted survivalist ideology, envisioned a world where he and a chosen companion could dominate others without consequence. Ng entered that world willingly. The two men fed off each other's fantasies, turning ideology into action. Together, they abducted their victims, men, women, and even children. Some were targeted for perceived threats, others simply because they crossed the wrong path. Once inside the cabin or its underground cells, the victims were stripped of their freedom and subjected to torture that Lake and Ng documented on video. Those tapes would later become some of the most horrifying evidence ever presented in a courtroom, showing not only the cruelty inflicted, but the coldness with which it was delivered. Lake acted as the dominant figure, but Ng participated fully, restraining victims, intimidating them, and helping carry out the murders. The two men operated with chilling organization, burying remains around the property and keeping personal belongings as trophies. The crimes might have continued indefinitely if not for a single mistake. In 1985, Ng was caught shoplifting at a hardware store, prompting Lake to intervene. The confrontation escalated, and Lake, fearing arrest, swallowed a cyanide pill he had carried for years. He died shortly after, leaving Ng to flee the country. When investigators searched the cabin in the aftermath, they uncovered the full scale of the horror. Bone fragments scattered across the property, the torture bunker, and video recordings confirming the deaths of at least 11 victims, likely more. Ng escaped to Canada, but was eventually captured and extradited back to the United States. His trial became one of the most expensive and complex in California history, marked by years of delays, self-representation attempts, and endless motions. But the evidence was overwhelming. Ng was convicted of 11 counts of murder and sentenced to death, where he remains on death row. This case stands as a chilling example of what can emerge when two violent minds converge, a partnership where cruelty is amplified and morality disappears entirely. And while this case centered on brutality hidden deep within the woods, the next reveals a criminal empire built across oceans, where human lives became currency in a global smuggling network. Case number 2 is that of Cheng Ping, known around the world as Sister Ping, a woman who quietly built one of the most powerful and lucrative human smuggling networks of the modern era. Unlike crimes driven by impulse or personal conflict, her empire was built through calculation, financial ambition, and a willingness to exploit desperation on a massive scale. Her story stretches across continents, weaving through underground routes, international waters, and hidden financial channels, all centered on one commodity: people. Sister Ping began operating out of Chinatown in New York City, blending seamlessly into a community where many residents shared a common struggle: the search for opportunity, stability, and a chance to begin again in America. She positioned herself as a helper, someone who could reunite families or offer passage to a new life. But behind that carefully maintained image lay an operation built on exploitation. She charged migrants exorbitant fees, often upwards of $18,000 to $35,000 per person, trapping them in years of debt the moment they stepped onto U.S. soil. Her network was vast and ruthlessly efficient. Using fishing boats, cargo ships, and international safe houses, she moved people across oceans with military-like precision. When migrants arrived, they were often held hostage until their families paid the final balance, a tactic that turned human smuggling into a hybrid of transportation and extortion. Sister Ping was the center of it all, coordinating movements from her storefront while laundering millions through secret accounts and trusted intermediaries. The turning point in her empire came with the infamous voyage of the Golden Venture, a ship carrying nearly 300 Chinese migrants that ran aground off Queens in 1993. The tragedy exposed the brutal conditions migrants faced: cramped holds, starvation-level rations, and the ever-present risk of death at sea. 10 migrants drowned while attempting to swim to shore. The story captured national attention, prompting federal investigations that led directly to Sister Ping. As U.S. authorities unraveled her financial and logistical network, it became clear she had operated one of the most sophisticated smuggling systems of the era. After fleeing to China and later to Hong Kong, she was eventually arrested and extradited to the United States. In court, prosecutors described her not as a benevolent figure, but as the architect of a multi-million-dollar criminal empire built on fear, manipulation, and human suffering. She was convicted of hostage-taking, money laundering, and human smuggling, receiving a lengthy federal sentence. Sister Ping died in prison, leaving behind a legacy defined not by the lives she helped, but by the thousands she endangered for profit. Her case is a stark reminder that exploitation often hides behind the illusion of opportunity. And while this case centered on global crime and financial power, the next shifts to something far more personal. A trusted physician who violated the very people who came to him for care, using his position to commit acts that shocked an entire community. Case number 3 is that of Dr. Zhi Cheng, a Queens physician whose crimes shook the medical community and shattered the trust of countless patients. This is not a story of violence carried out in dark alleys or remote hideaways. It is a story born inside exam rooms, hospital corridors, and private spaces where vulnerable people sought help, only to be exploited by the very professionals sworn to protect them. Cheng worked as an internal medicine doctor, a position that granted him authority, respect, and intimate access to the lives of his patients. To the outside world, he appeared accomplished, educated, well-regarded, and trusted. But behind that professional facade was a predatory pattern that grew more brazen over time. Cheng began drugging patients and acquaintances with powerful sedatives, substances capable of rendering a person helpless within minutes. These drugs were obtained through his medical position, giving him the means to commit crimes few suspected were even possible. Once his victims were incapacitated, Cheng sexually assaulted them, and, in a disturbing escalation, recorded the attacks on video. These recordings would later become crucial evidence. They exposed not just criminal behavior, but a chilling level of calculation and control. Cheng preserved the footage, cataloged it, and kept it hidden long enough to give investigators insight into just how many individuals he harmed and how long the abuse had continued. The case broke open when a colleague discovered suspicious images on Cheng's electronic devices. What began as a mandatory report quickly turned into a sweeping investigation. Detectives seized his computers, phones, and storage drives, uncovering an extensive collection of footage documenting repeated assaults. Each video offered a painful window into what his victims endured, unconscious, unaware, and entirely unable to defend themselves. Once confronted with the evidence, the reality became impossible for Cheng to deny. Prosecutors charged him with sexual assault, abuse of power, and illegal drug distribution. The case gained national attention, raising larger questions about medical oversight, access to controlled substances, and the vulnerability of patients who trust their doctors implicitly. During the trial, prosecutors emphasized the gravity of Cheng's betrayal. They argued that he weaponized his medical knowledge, using sedatives to eliminate consent entirely. The defense offered little room for interpretation, as the video evidence was overwhelming. Victims, some of whom only learned what had happened after police notified them, delivered statements describing the trauma of realizing they had been violated without memory, awareness, or the ability to resist. Ultimately, Cheng received a 24-year federal sentence, a punishment reflecting both the severity of the acts and the lasting harm inflicted on those he targeted. The case stands as a haunting reminder that danger can come not only from strangers, but from those who hold positions of trust and authority. And while this case revolves around betrayal within the medical field, the next shifts back to raw violence. A moment inside an immigration office where hope turned to rage, and a desperate act ended a man's life with shocking finality. Case number 4 is that of Yanjun Xu, a woman whose desperation, frustration, and mounting fear culminated in a violent act inside a place meant to offer guidance and protection. This case begins not in a hidden corner of the city, but inside a professional office, a space where people come seeking help with some of the most stressful situations of their lives: immigration, paperwork, and the fragile hope for a future in the United States. For Zhang, that hope was slipping away, and what started as an argument with her attorney escalated into a deadly confrontation. Zhang had been working with immigration lawyer Jim Lee, a professional known for handling complicated asylum claims. For many clients, Lee represented not just legal assistance, but the possibility of safety and stability. But Zhang's case had become fraught with tension. She believed Lee was no longer fighting for her, that he had given up on her asylum claim, and that the dream she clung to was about to collapse. As the pressure mounted, her emotional state deteriorated. What should have remained a difficult conversation soon spiraled beyond control. On the day of the attack, Zhang arrived at Lee's office already overwhelmed by frustration. The meeting quickly intensified. Lee attempted to explain that he could no longer represent her, a decision he made based on the legal realities of her case. But to Zhang, that explanation sounded like abandonment. Panic and anger fused, and within moments, she made a fateful decision. She produced a knife and stabbed Lee repeatedly, the violence unfolding in a place typically associated with safety and order. Co-workers and staff rushed to intervene, but the attack was swift and devastating. Lee collapsed from his injuries, and despite emergency efforts, he did not survive. The scene left witnesses shocked. A professional environment suddenly transformed into a crime scene defined by chaos, fear, and disbelief. Police arrived within minutes. Zhang was taken into custody at the scene, offering no coherent explanation beyond emotional distress and fear about her future. As investigators pieced together the events leading up to the killing, it became clear this was not a premeditated act, but a tragic explosion fueled by anxiety, instability, and a collapsing sense of hope. The community reacted with grief and outrage. Lee was remembered as a dedicated attorney, someone who worked tirelessly for clients facing some of the most difficult circumstances imaginable. His death became a chilling reminder of how vulnerable legal professionals can be when emotions in high-stakes cases reach dangerous extremes. As Zhang awaited trial, the case raised broader questions about the pressures faced by immigrants navigating a complex system, and the emotional toll when those pressures become unbearable. But while the context added depth, it could not excuse the act. Zhang stood charged with murder, her future now tied not to asylum courts, but to a criminal courtroom where her actions would be judged purely on the violence she inflicted. And while this case unfolded inside a quiet office, the next takes us to a rural farm in Oklahoma, where a financial dispute erupted into an execution-style massacre that left investigators stunned by its brutality. Case number 5 is that of Cheng Wu, a man whose actions turned a financial dispute into a brutal execution-style killing that shocked investigators across Oklahoma. This case begins not with hidden motives or long-standing grudges, but with a business disagreement tied to the state's expanding marijuana industry, an operation often run quietly in rural areas where oversight is limited and conflicts can simmer beneath the surface. Wu had invested a significant sum, $300,000, into a marijuana grow operation located on a secluded farm. The business relationship between Wu and the workers operating the farm had been tense, strained by financial misunderstandings and accusations of mismanagement. As frustration grew over the alleged mishandling of his investment, Wu's anger escalated into something far more dangerous. On the day of the killings, Wu arrived at the farm armed and intent on confrontation. What followed was a scene of raw violence. He gathered the workers, for Chinese nationals who had been living and working on the property, and demanded answers about the money he believed had been lost or stolen. When the explanations failed to satisfy him, the situation spiraled instantly into terror. Wu executed all 4 workers, shooting them one by one. The killings were deliberate and methodical, leaving no room for interpretation. Rather than flee immediately, Wu remained in the area long enough to ensure no one survived, turning a business dispute into a massacre that left the rural community stunned. The discovery came quickly. Another worker who had managed to escape notified authorities, leading police to the gruesome scene. The remote location, normally quiet and isolated, became a chaotic convergence point for law enforcement, medical teams, and investigators trying to piece together how a financial disagreement had transformed into such a brutal crime. A manhunt for Wu began almost immediately. Given his connections, language barriers, and the transient nature of the illegal marijuana industry, investigators feared he could disappear before capture. But within days, Wu was located in Florida, attempting to flee the country. His arrest ended a nationwide search and ensured that the case would face full scrutiny in court. During his trial, prosecutors made the motive clear. Wu believed he had been cheated, and instead of resolving the dispute through legal or financial channels, he resorted to violence with chilling precision. The defense offered little room for mitigation. The evidence, eyewitness accounts, and Wu's attempt to escape all solidified the narrative of a calculated execution driven by anger and greed. Wu was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, a ruling that reflected the brutality of the act and the suffering inflicted on his victims. Workers who had traveled far from home in search of opportunity, only to meet their deaths at the hands of someone who once stood as their business partner. This case revealed how quickly financial disputes can twist into deadly outcomes, especially in industries operating at the edges of legality. And while this story centered on execution-style violence, the next case shifts back toward predation, involving a USC doctoral student accused of drugging and assaulting women using calculated methods that shocked the academic community. Case number 6 is that of Sizhe Weng, a USC doctoral student whose carefully maintained academic persona concealed a disturbing pattern of predatory behavior. This case does not involve violence erupting in public or high-stakes confrontations. Instead, it centers on calculated manipulation carried out behind closed doors, where trust and vulnerability were exploited with chilling precision. Weng was pursuing advanced research at the University of Southern California, surrounded by respected faculty, competitive peers, and a culture of intense academic pressure. On the surface, he appeared focused, disciplined, and promising, the kind of student who blended seamlessly into the demanding environment of a top-tier university. But beneath that image was a troubling reality. Weng allegedly used sedatives to incapacitate women, taking advantage of their trust to commit sexual assaults they were powerless to resist. The allegations emerged gradually, as victims began to piece together experiences that felt disjointed and inexplicable: sudden memory gaps, unexplained injuries, and unsettling symptoms of heavy sedation. For many, the realization that they had been drugged came only after police began identifying connections between Weng and multiple victims. Their accounts revealed a pattern. He provided drinks, invited acquaintances to his residence, or used casual social interactions as opportunities to administer sedatives strong enough to erase both awareness and consent. When investigators executed search warrants on Weng's devices, they uncovered digital evidence that supported the accusations: footage, messages, and traces of drugs used to incapacitate victims. Each discovery deepened the severity of the case, revealing that the assaults were not impulsive, but methodical and planned. Weng's position as a doctoral student granted him both anonymity and a veneer of professionalism, making it easier for him to avoid early suspicion while continuing the pattern of abuse. As victims came forward, prosecutors built a case portraying Weng as a calculated predator who weaponized substances normally used in medical or research environments. The allegations shook USC and reverberated beyond campus, raising deeper questions about academic oversight, power dynamics, and how individuals in trusted roles can manipulate systems to commit harm. Weng was arrested and charged with multiple counts of sexual assault, drugging victims, and related offenses. He has continued to maintain his innocence while awaiting trial, but the evidence presented paints a picture of deliberate violations of bodily autonomy and trust. The case remains ongoing, but its impact is already clear: a community forced to confront the reality that danger can hide behind achievement, and that predation can be masked by intelligence, ambition, and academic success. And while this case exposes exploitation conducted in secrecy, the next story shifts to another form of hidden allegiance, involving a government official accused of acting not for her country, but for the interests of a foreign power. Case number 7 is that of Linda Sun, a former New York State official whose rise through government circles appeared promising and respectable, until investigators uncovered a hidden allegiance that transformed her career into one of the most unsettling political scandals in recent years. Unlike crimes driven by violence or personal conflict, this case is defined by covert influence, strategic deception, and the quiet infiltration of governmental systems by a foreign power. Sun built her reputation as a capable political operative. She held positions within New York state government and maintained professional relationships with public officials, community leaders, and advocacy groups. On the surface, she appeared dedicated to public service. But beneath that professional facade was a deeply embedded connection to the Chinese government, one that prosecutors allege shaped her decisions, alliances, and access to sensitive political spaces. According to federal investigators, Sun acted for years as an unregistered agent of China, receiving millions in financial benefits in exchange for her cooperation. Her responsibilities allegedly included shaping political narratives, influencing policy discussions, and providing access to U.S. officials, all while concealing her true affiliations. Such operations, often subtle and carefully crafted, aim not to create dramatic events, but to quietly shift political landscapes in ways that benefit foreign interests. The scheme came to light only after investigators noticed unusual financial transactions and inconsistencies in Sun's political activities. Large sums of money moved through accounts connected to her, far beyond what her government salary could explain. At the same time, she worked to advance agendas that aligned suspiciously with the goals of the Chinese government, particularly in areas of immigration, community outreach, and political messaging. When federal agents confronted her, the scale of the alleged conspiracy became clearer. Sun was not acting alone. Her connections extended through networks designed to exploit diaspora communities and exert influence on public officials. Her access to state-level decision-making gave her proximity to sensitive information, making her actions not only deceptive but potentially dangerous. The charges against her include acting as an unregistered foreign agent, fraud, and financial crimes tied to the funds she allegedly received. Prosecutors argue that Sun's actions represent a deliberate betrayal of the public trust, using her position of authority to benefit a foreign government rather than the people she was appointed to serve. Her case prompted widespread concern across political and security circles, raising questions about how foreign influence can infiltrate even mid-level government positions without detection. It also sparked discussions about the vulnerabilities within local and state systems, vulnerabilities that foreign governments can exploit with strategic precision. Linda Sun now awaits trial, her once promising career overshadowed entirely by allegations of covert loyalty and corruption. Her story is a reminder that threats to national security do not always come from abroad. Sometimes, they grow quietly within the institutions meant to protect the public. And while this case deals with political infiltration and secret allegiance, the next one moves into the realm of international espionage on a global scale, involving a Chinese intelligence officer who targeted American aerospace technology in a high-stakes operation that reached all the way to the FBI. Case number 8 is that of Yanjun Xu, a Chinese intelligence officer whose covert mission placed him at the center of one of the most consequential espionage cases in recent U.S. history. Unlike crimes marked by sudden violence or emotional collapse, this case is defined by long-term strategy, global maneuvering, and a calculated effort to infiltrate the heart of American innovation. Xu's target was not a person, it was technology, specifically the advanced aeronautics research that gives the United States its competitive edge. Xu operated within China's Ministry of State Security, MSS, the nation's primary intelligence agency. His specialty was aviation and aerospace espionage. His objective: obtain proprietary information from U.S. contractors, particularly GE Aviation, whose composite fan blade technology was considered among the most advanced in the world. These materials, used in jet engines, represented years of research, billions of dollars in investment, and enormous strategic value. Stealing them would not simply boost China's capabilities, it would erode the technological advantage of the United States. Xu's method followed a familiar pattern in modern espionage. He identified key employees within GE Aviation and nearby firms, then used professional outreach, academic invitations, and seemingly legitimate exchanges to draw them into his orbit. Under the cover of hosting presentations in China, he attempted to extract proprietary research, technical specifications, and internal documents. His approach blended subtle manipulation with the promise of professional opportunity. But the FBI was already watching. When GE Aviation alerted authorities to suspicious contact, federal agents moved quickly, launching a counterintelligence investigation to determine whether the outreach was part of a broader attempt to harvest classified or proprietary U.S. technology. Over time, Xu's communications, requests, and travel patterns confirmed the suspicion. This was not ordinary professional engagement. It was espionage conducted under the direction of a foreign intelligence service. The FBI devised a strategy to lure Xu to Europe, where an arrest would be legally possible. In a rare and high-stakes maneuver, Xu traveled to Belgium expecting to meet an engineer carrying valuable technical data. Instead, Belgian authorities detained him on the spot. His extradition to the United States marked the first time a Chinese intelligence officer had ever been brought onto U.S. soil for trial, a milestone that reverberated through intelligence communities worldwide. In court, prosecutors presented Xu as a highly trained operative who worked systematically to steal aviation secrets on behalf of the Chinese government. Evidence included emails, encrypted communications, and his own attempts to recruit engineers. Despite attempts by the defense to paint the conduct as benign academic exchange, the jury rejected the narrative. Xu was convicted of attempting to steal trade secrets and economic espionage, a ruling that underscored the severity of his actions and their implications for national security. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, a stark message to foreign intelligence services that technological theft would not go unanswered. This case marked the culmination of a series of crimes driven by ambition, secrecy, and exploitation, a reminder that danger comes in many forms, from violent outbursts to sophisticated global operations. Each story reveals another layer of hidden darkness, shaping a portrait of crime that stretches far beyond city lines.